Good evening, USC Trojans. Welcome, USC students and alumni, to our first Financial Literacy Series event of the Spring 2025 semester. Our title for this evening is Financial Foundations, Starting Small to Win Big. I am Lori Shreve-Blake, Senior Director for Career Engagement at the USC Career Center, and joining me this evening is Deborah Brittain, Employer Recruitment Intern and graduating senior from the University of Southern California Sol Price School of Public Policy. We will be giving out a copy of our speaker's book entitled Earn, Save, Spend to 98 students who stay on the webinar, as well as we'll be raffling off 2 books to alumni attending our webinar this evening. Students and alumni will be notified by email and will pick up their books at the Career Center starting next Wednesday, March 5th, at the Student Union 110, which is our office. Please place your questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, and our speaker has graciously agreed to share her contact information for additional follow-up and answers to your questions. It is my pleasure to introduce our fellow USC alumni and speaker for this evening, Laura Davis. As a financial advisor and educator for over a decade, Laura Davis, CFP, has been helping her clients and audience overcome their money blocks so they can spend their energy doing what they love. Laura's illustrated personal finance book, Earn, Save, Spend, is accessible to everyone, whether they're just starting out or miles down the path to financial wellness. Whether it's coaching in her advisory practice, speaking, or consulting with teams, Laura teaches people to transform their financial lives. Please join me in giving a virtual warm Trojan welcome to our speaker for this evening and alumna, Laura Davis.
Wow, Lori, that was like the most enthusiastic introduction that I've ever received. So I'm just so thrilled to be here. I graduated from USC in 2004. I have a degree in comparative literature. And my career went through a few iterations before I became a financial advisor. So I started off after I graduated as a real estate agent. I sold foreclosures during the Great Recession in Atlanta, where I now live. And I had a short stint as a recruiter before I found my my passion in financial planning. So I'm just really grateful to be here, grateful that Lori has looped me in, and I hope that everybody gets a lot of value out of this. And we're going to be going through a ton of information relatively quickly. So I would just encourage everyone to take away, one thing from the webinar today. If one action item, one thing, I do have a worksheet that I'll send out at the end, that if you guys want to do those action items, then I think that would be helpful rather than just leaving and letting everything go out of your head. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to get started. Lori and Deborah are going to be monitoring questions, and we're going to be taking them after I present. So I'm hoping that you all can just give me the energy through the screen that I need to be excited, because without any sort of feedback at all, it's not quite as much fun for me. So just, give me all the good vibes. Okay. Okay, so I love to ask questions here, but I'm not going to get any feedback, so I'll just ask them rhetorically. Hopefully, you guys can all sort of think in your head. There's probably not too much need to write down notes. But when I am looking at an audience, a lot of times, or clients, a lot of times people feel like I'm not good at money. all of these money messages that we get when we're growing up through school, even if there's alumni out there and there's adults and they're in their financial world, and maybe if you're even successful in your career, even then, a lot of us don't have a grasp on basic financial literacy. And oftentimes when we're going through the world and we're online, it just feels super scammy. My industry is full of people who want to sell you product, like life insurance and mutual funds. And eventually when you have money, they will want to manage that money. And it's just very confusing as to what you really need and what you can leave behind. And I have made it my mission to try to help people overcome that financial overwhelm and really pare it down and boil it down to the things that are really important. The other thing that I want to say that I was talking with Deborah earlier about is that if you are currently an undergrad student or a grad student at USC, you are entering a much more challenging financial environment, personal financial environment, than I entered when I graduated in 2004. We were able to afford rent and food and have a little bit left over. And now the financial situation is tighter. Your average starting salary, which I got from Lori, for graduates starting out is $70,000. You'll see in a little bit, I put together a sample budget for that. But after you pay all of your taxes, and all of the other things that you have to pay for, it's just, it doesn't add up to much. So you're entering into a different environment where you may have to make more difficult choices. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I don't want you to feel discouraged, but it just is going to take a mindset shift, not only from you guys, who the responsibility really shouldn't be falling on, but those of us who are my age, elder millennials, Gen X, and boomers, to stop blaming you for having a hard time in this current situation and taking responsibility for our part in creating the financial scenario that exists in currently. Okay. So a lot of what I talk about is controlling the things that you can control. Cash flow planning is really important. Cash flow just means what is coming in and what's going out. So whatever your income is, and then what your budget is. So it's just what's in and out, and having a good handle on this is really important. So we'll talk a little bit more about budgeting later. Values, goals, and purpose. I am a huge believer in understanding your own values. Part of what we are all confronted with, and I struggle with this so much myself and always have, is when we see people who are either in real life around us or online who appear to have all these things, and we are constantly bombarded with messages about what we should want and how we should look and where we should spend our money and our time, it is really difficult to then parse that out and say, okay, like, stop for a minute. What's really important to me? Where should I be putting my money and my resources? And, and if it is in your value system to have a really fancy car at some point, more power to you, but make sure that you're making those decisions based on your own value system rather than what the sort of zeitgeist is telling you that is important. Understanding financial systems. So this is where a lot of us fall down, because our financial systems are very complicated, and they were also created not for most of us, right? They were really created for the 1%. And many of you, because you have an incredible degree and you're very smart, will get into that 1%. But statistically, a lot of us don't ever get there. And so understanding how, even with a middle-class salary and upper middle-class salary, that you can take control and make sure that you're taking advantage of what you can inside of that system is really important. And then consistency and follow through. So, I know things feel real uncertain right now in so many ways. And part of what I think about is, I can understand why someone would say, well, why would I do anything? It seems like the world is going to end anyway. And why am I going to bother saving when I could be hit by a bus tomorrow? But the way that I like to think about it is I'm planning for the most likely scenario. And the most likely scenario is that the world will keep on turning. It may not look exactly the same. We might not have, for instance, the same rates of return in the markets, in the stock market that we have. But I have never met someone who says, I wish that I'd saved less. So we're going to talk a lot about doing little things now that really explode later on, that provide that exponential increase in return. And if you consistently put a little bit away at a time, it'll do great for you. Okay, here's what we're going to talk about today. Money buckets. This is how I think about money and how it's categorized. This is my own personal sort of way of categorizing money. But I find that it's really important. It has a lot to do with tax. We're going to talk a little bit about income tax because it is the biggest expense that most of us have in our lifetime. We're going to talk about spending plans. So this is your budget. Sometimes we don't like to use the word budget because that feels really restrictive. A spending plan is more fluid. And then the importance of compound interest and what it can do for you over time. And then the essential accounts that you need as a graduating senior or as an adult. So money buckets. All of your money pretty much will fall into one of these 4 buckets. Your cash bucket is basically your checking account and your savings account. I think of your checking account as just being your sort of in-out account. So that's where any money that you earn comes in, or if you're still at school and your parents are helping out with your expenses, or you're getting money from student loans, that's where that money goes and you spend it out. Your savings account, which should be different from your checking account and should be a high yield savings account, not at your brick and mortar bank. So don't get a savings account at Bank of America, Truist, what other big banks are out there? Chase. They won't pay you any interest. So your savings account should be a separate account that makes a higher rate of return. And this is really for your short and midterm goals, and as well as your emergency reserves. Any income in a cash account is during that cash account generates during the year is going to be taxed at your ordinary income rate. So if it's more than $10, you're going to get a little form from your bank that's called a 1099 INT, and you're going to report that on your taxes. So it's kind of annoying because you're like, well, if it's only $12.95, like, why would I have to report this? But the way that the IRS works is that they match. So your bank's going to report that, and the IRS is going to say, oops, you didn't report that. You know, if I'm like, well, I didn't report that, then the IRS is going to send me a letter and it's going to be this big hassle. So try to make sure you're organized and you're reporting things. The second bucket is your pre-tax bucket. So this is your, if you are contributing or you will contribute to a 401k. Most big institutions that are universities have what's called a 403b, but they behave exactly the same. So if you have access to a 401k or a 403b, you can put that money in pre-tax, which means that you don't pay tax on that contribution in that calendar year. Reduces your taxes by the amount that you put in. Your third bucket is your Roth bucket. So your Roth, you can do a 401k Roth. You can also have a Roth IRA that's an individual account. Your Roth, you don't get a tax break on in this year. You put the money in, and then the money actually grows tax-free, and it's withdrawn tax-free as long as you meet certain rules about when you withdraw it. So Roths are really great for people who are in lower tax brackets because you're getting a longer term benefit. So you have both of those options. And then 4 is a taxable brokerage. Most people probably don't need a taxable brokerage. You know, a lot of people will go into like if you have Robinhood, for instance, and you're like, oh, I put a few $100s or whatever in there and I'm trading it. That's usually in a taxable account. They actually don't allow, law does not allow you to trade crypto, for instance, in retirement account. So like if you can't put a Roth in there and then trade and then trade Ethereum inside of that account. So, so the taxable brokerage is just not a tax advantaged account. Anytime that it generates any income, that'll be taxed at an annual basis. If you sell something that you've held in there, that'll be taxed at capital gains rate. So there's different tax treatments. If I'm having my post-tax dollars though, and they're either growing tax-free in my Roth or they're growing taxable in my brokerage, I'm gonna put them in my Roth. So I guess my whole, like, the takeaway here is most people don't actually need a taxable brokerage account. Because they don't have enough money to maximize the tax advantaged accounts that they have access to. So that pre-tax and that Roth. For those of you who are working and are still in school, and maybe you're not earning that much income, but you might be able to contribute to that Roth, you can open up a Roth account and just contribute a little bit. And every little bit does help. Now, you can't contribute more than $7,000 in a single calendar year, and you also can't contribute more than what you earn. So if you only earned $5,000, you can't contribute $7,000. So hopefully that helps. I know this is a little bit confusing because it's a lot of pieces. But again, the basic premise is that you should really be trying to get money into these tax advantaged accounts before you move into a taxable brokerage account. All right, I'm going to move on. Income tax. So here in the United States, we have what is called a progressive tax system, which is based on income. So a lot of people will say things like, I don't want to make more because that'll bounce me into a higher tax bracket. But the way that tax brackets work is that if I make $100,000 and you make $200,000, we both pay the same amount on that first 100,000. It's only when you get to that next level that amount is taxed on more. So you do have an incentive to always be making more money. State taxes, it varies by state. Some states have no income tax, like Tennessee and Florida and Texas. California has a very high state income tax. Normally, state income tax is more like a flat tax. The brackets are very small and they go up very quickly. So in California, if you're at the highest tax bracket, I think you're paying a little bit more than 13% in state income tax on top of your federal taxes. And then FICA taxes are separate. So this is also sort of confusing for people from a government perspective because they sort of lump all these things into one. Your federal taxes pay for federal budget items. Your FICA taxes are for Social Security and Medicare. So this is your payroll tax. And if you look at your paycheck stub, if anybody who has one, if you look at your paycheck stub, you'll see that you are paying for half of this, and your employer is paying for the other half. If you're self-employed, you pay for both halves. So you have basically an extra 15% tax burden. Well, an extra 7.5% tax burden if you're self-employed. And if you're employing someone else, of course, you pay their half of the tax as well. This is a very, very high level. There is a ton of complexity and nuance in tax, but it's just really important that you understand how impactful it can be so that you can try to minimize your taxes over time. I'm not against paying taxes, by the way. But I also don't want to pay more than I need to. Okay, so this is the most recent household spending from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We'll probably get the 2024 spending soon. I always look at this and it seems low because this is, again, household spending. It doesn't really discriminate, unfortunately, between a single person household and a 6-person or 10-person household. It's just, this is like all of it lumped together. But most people are spending an inordinately large amount of money on housing and transportation. I feel like these food at home and food away from home numbers are low, but again, I have biases as well. I tend to work with wealthier clients who spend, $1,500 a month on groceries for a family of 4. And then that healthcare cost also to me seems low, but again, it's averaging in people who pay hardly anything or nothing for healthcare because they're uninsured or they're on Medicaid systems. So anyway, if you want to think in your head, like, is this what I spend? Then, you can write that down somewhere. Okay, spending plan. So spending is basically chunked into one of two categories: discretionary spending and non-discretionary spending. The way to figure out what's discretionary, non-discretionary is like, do you absolutely need it to live? And then everything else is kind of discretionary. And it's not that you shouldn't be spending in a discretionary category, but also it's just helpful to be honest about whether you really need that or whether you actually have to have it. So when we're looking at non-discretionary spending, housing, like, is it safe and adequate, and clean, right? And doesn't have like a whole bunch of black mold in it. Food, again, is like grocery store and off brands. Transportation, if it's for a lot of us, public transportation in certain cities is going to be the way to go. And then healthcare expenses, which of course have gotten more and more expensive over time. But I don't view those sorts of things as discretionary. Eating out is pretty much discretionary. You can tell yourself, I'm doing this because I have to, because, if I didn't do it this way, then my job and, all these things. But, I just encourage you to be honest with yourself about, what you actually need. And it's not to shame any spending at all. It's just to make sure that in your own head, what's discretionary and what's non-discretionary. And you also know, and that way you also have an easier time spending towards your values. Okay, so here is, I have my slides mixed up here. I'm so sorry. I had another slide in here that I'm not seeing for some reason. So I will go and try to find it because it was very interesting. It basically showed how much your take-home pay would be if you're working in California on a $70,000 salary. Your take-home pay, this is not a spoiler, but on $70,000, which is a little less than $6,000 a month in net pay, you're going to be taking home $4,400 after you pay for taxes in California. So if you choose to stay there or if you're living there, again, your taxes are relatively high. So if you're making that average of what most graduates make after they graduate from USC, and you're making that $70,000 and you're living in California, you can expect to take home every month approximately $4,400. I have put together a budget that I think is relatively bare bones. I don't see a whole lot of wiggle room here. But I would love it if you guys, like, if anybody has a comment, if you would chat it, and then Deborah we can talk about this afterwards. But when I look at this, the rent on average, if you're living by yourself, you're not getting a place in LA for less than $3,000, right? This really assumes that you have a roommate, that you're sharing expenses, and that you're not, going out, 3 times a week to eat. You're not, you have sort of a bare minimum car. So I would love to know if you guys have comments on what you think that this means. I would love to hear it. So, all right, let's talk about compound interest. So your interest earns interest. You earn on both the original investment and the accumulated interest. So essentially, if you invest $100 and it makes $5 in interest that year. If you have a 5% return, then the following year makes 5%. Now you're going to get $5 in, change and then it'll just compound from there. So that's how compound interest works. And it is really magical. It doesn't feel like that at the beginning because it's sort of this exponential curve. But again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, compound interest is, it's magical over time as long as you stay consistent with putting your money away. So this is just an illustration of the power of compounding. So the yellow column is $50 a month. So this is, I'm just putting $50 a month away for 40 years. So from age 22 to age 62, I'm putting $50 a month, and this is at 8% rate of return annually over time. The US stock market has gotten about 10% over the past 30 years. There's a lot of, and the past 100, but there's a lot of reasons why I don't think that our stock market will have those kinds of returns, and I don't use those kinds of returns when I'm projecting my clients' results. And well, I'll just tell you this briefly. So what happened in the last half of the last century, after World War II, is that we had some economic factors that really fueled the growth of our economy. And the way that stocks increase over time in value is that people buy those products, feed the engines of those companies, and then the values of their stocks go up. Whether companies are worth what the stock tells you that they are at all times is a big question mark. Like, I don't know if anybody's seen Tesla lately, but it's certainly not valued like a car company. It's valued like a tech company, right? So we can have arguments about that, but overall, if you look at the entire stock market, those returns over that last half of the last century were fueled by the baby boomers, so a large increase in population. We had a huge increase in life expectancy, so there were just more people. We also had a fairly liberal immigration policy, and so our actual population exploded. So the amount of pure dollars going into the economy. Women came into the workforce en masse in the 70s and 80s. So we also had that amount of economic activity, increasing all of those companies. And then we also had the rise of credit card debt, which allowed people to pump more money in that they didn't have. Our credit card debt total in this country has never been higher than it is today, and it is a really sort of scary statistic. But if we look at our environment today, people they don't have as much credit left over. They're maxing things out. They can't access those dollars that they used to be able to access. People are not having babies anymore. We're not replacing ourselves in the same way. And our population growth is slowing significantly. And we are also very much pushing an anti-immigration agenda, which also will not help with our population issue. So not that it's necessarily an issue, but from an economic standpoint, if you don't have that growth of population, you can't have the growth of companies, and you can't have this very large increase in the value of the stock market, because a very few very wealthy people can't prop it up in the same way that a robust middle class did. So all that to say, that was a very long explanation for why I don't use a 10% rate of return, and why, if you're looking at different investment options and situations, that it's probably best if you don't if you don't base your assumptions off of that either. I think Dave Ramsey used to have a calculator on his site that gave a 12% rate of return. And it just made the results look so fabulous. But of course, that just doesn't happen over time for most people, especially if they have a balanced portfolio. So but you can see from this chart that the power of compounding, even at $50, $100, $300 a month, can really explode into these very large results over time, and you can see the exponential curve. So I know it'll never feel like that in the first 5 years, in the first 10 years, but all of a sudden you'll start accumulating that money, and money will give you more choices as you age. If you want to play with a compound interest calculator, my favorite one is at Bankrate.com. So you can go there and kind of play with those different ideas. Okay, I think that everyone needs these accounts. A lot of times as we age, we tend to accumulate a bunch of different accounts, and oftentimes I'm finding myself going through with my clients and paring down their accounts and combining their accounts and consolidating. And it's just easier if you don't ever have to get there. So, so you definitely need a checking account. A lot of people do prefer that in-person, that brick and mortar bank. I don't know if the listeners on this webinar would necessarily care about ever going into a bank in person. There are a few occasions though when it is kind of nice to be able to walk in there. Again, this is your in and out account. This is where your paycheck would get deposited. And this is where your everyday expenses and savings come out of. You definitely need that savings account, that high yield savings account. If you want to go and look at high yield savings accounts rates right now, you can go to, I also like Bankrate for that. They just list all of the top performing high yield savings account. I would definitely caution against trying to like switch your money from one thing to another over time, because it's just like chasing a little bit of interest here and there. I would pick one and just stick with it. And then you need your employer sponsored plan. So if you are going to go and work for an organization that offers an employer sponsored plan, you got to have that plan. Make sure that you're always contributing at least enough to get the match, or else you're leaving free money on the table. Not everywhere offers a match. Not everywhere even offers an employer sponsored account. But it is something that a whole lot of us do have when we go out there into the working world. And it's also something you need to pay attention to with your job offers. So make sure you understand what their employer match is, because some people are way more generous than others. So a lot of places will offer 2% or 3% or up to a cap. Here in Atlanta, we're a hub for a lot of different Fortune 500 companies, and Delta, for instance, offers a 7% match. It's amazing. Salesforce, on the other hand, offers $5,000 period the end. It's like 2% up to $5,000 and then they stop. So it's important to understand what that is so that you can compare your offers. And then your Roth IRA, this is an individual account. So your employer doesn't own it, you own it. You can open it at any number of places. You can open it at, I like Vanguard and Fidelity because they're simple and they're giant, and it's free. And trading on there is free as long as you're using their own products, which are all, those sort of big, like the S&P 500, these big mutual funds that are well diversified. So I highly recommend, even if it's like a little bit, that you have a little bit in a Roth IRA account. And that's all that you need. You really don't need anything else besides those. So if you find that you have like more accounts than that, you can always look at it and say like, do I really need this other account over here? Okay. So we have little action items. I can definitely share my, I have an action items sheet that I can share with all of you. But here are the things that I would love for you to take action on. If you can do one, that would be great. And then if you just simply can't because you have way too much other stuff going on, try to just take one thing again away from this webinar that you didn't know before. So you can categorize your accounts into those 4 money buckets. Again, on my worksheet, I have them listed, so you don't have to remember what they are. You can pull a copy of your paycheck stub if you're currently working, and you can look at your deductions. So just like check out those line items, and if you never have before, and just look at them and see, oh my gosh, how much are they taking out for all these different things? If you feel that you need to get a better hold on your spending, just write down every expense for the next 3 days. It's probably no more than 3 to 4 transactions every day. If that, some days you'll get by with none. And it'll start helping you make more conscious decisions. And then from a compound interest perspective, if you want to start taking advantage of that, and you should, if you can, when you're young, open a Roth and just auto deposit like a little amount every month. Like maybe it's $30, maybe it's $100, but whatever it is, just make it consistent. And then in a few months, bump it up by a few dollars and see how it feels. I just promise you that you won't regret doing a little bit now. And then consider consolidating your accounts if you have more than those 4 essential accounts. So I have these 3 last financial tips. So I always want people to be intentional about their money. And I think a lot of us sort of let things get away from us. Our money is sort of out there and we don't know where it is. And if you're young, it's just easier to create those good habits now and be really intentional about where you're spending your money. Are you spending it towards your values, or is it going places that aren't actually really important to you and that you're doing for others? Be diligent, be on top of it, be consistent. Think critically. So like, as you get older and you have more wealth accumulated, you will start being approached by people like me who are in my industry, right? And just always think, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I'm sure you guys have all been confronted with these kinds of like financial things on the internet and on social media, where people are like, oh, bank on yourself, put all of your money in this life insurance thing, or put your home in a trust. There's all of these sort of like, this is what the rich people do, you should do it too. And oftentimes when people are using like, this is what rich people do as a reason for doing something, it doesn't necessarily work for the rest of us. So always kind of think about the promises that financial professionals are making, and make sure that you always fully understand the things that you're buying. And then stay future focused. Again, I am completely aware of how hard this is, especially now, especially in today's climate when things feel so uncertain. It is really hard to stay focused on the future, but there are so many studies that show that individuals as well as companies who think 5 and 10 years down the road and make decisions based on those longer term horizons do better over time. So I would just highly encourage you to keep your eye on that prize and try not to let the noise of the day-to-day get in your way. And I just think that's really important. Okay. I would love it if you would all take this post-event survey. It's only 3 questions and it's very short, but it would be amazing if I could just get a little bit of feedback. And And so I would love it if you guys would do that. And I think I am happy to answer questions now.
Great. So Deborah is going to moderate our questions. So Deborah?
Hello. Thank you so much, Laura. That was incredibly insightful. I know myself, I was feeling a little overwhelmed about this, and even this little bit of snippet was very knowledgeable and insightful for me, and I hope for the rest of our viewers and attendees. So I'll just break it up into a couple of categories. The first one is about high yield savings accounts. And most of them are about how and where to open up high yield savings account, which companies have the best rates, and where should they open one up?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I have to say this disclaimer. I don't give financial advice to people who are not my clients. So I can educate, but I can't give like specific recommendations. However, I will say that normally the places that I go for high yield savings for my clients are American Express, Marcus by Goldman Sachs, Capital One. All of those have been very consistent. Sometimes one is slightly higher than another, but those three are great. Also, Citibank, which I think like used to be brick and mortar, but now is an online bank. Also tends to have pretty good rates. But again, I would highly encourage anybody who is looking at opening a new high yield savings account, go to bankrate.com and just click on, they like have a category that says savings accounts, and it'll tell you what the highest, like you can sort them and it'll tell you what the highest savings account rates are right now. And it's incredibly helpful. Again, I don't like to chase those rates, but it is having those that like visual is really helpful.
And to follow up on that, is credit score a factor, or is there a minimum interest rate to look out for?
Credit score is not a factor when it comes to high yield savings accounts at all. Credit really only is a factor when you are taking out debt, or when you're trying to rent something, from someone else. Sometimes it'll affect you if you're buying insurance. I wish that I'd had time to get into credit a little bit more, but I will say like briefly is it really the use for credit is for you to take out debt. The best credit is based on 5 overarching factors, but the most important ones are on-time payments and staying underneath 30% of your total credit utilization. So like, let's say that your credit card has a $10,000 limit. I'm just doing very simple math. Credit card has a $10,000 limit. Don't go over $3,000 in balance, right? And always pay it off every single month. Like don't let that balance build up. Because like it's just don't spend more than you make, if you can possibly help it. Now, have I been there? Yes. After I graduated, I had like 20 grand in credit card debt. It was really painful. And I spent all my time and all my extra money paying it off, which was not very much fun. And again, I know people are facing a whole lot more difficulty today, but yeah, no, the high yield savings account has nothing to do with your credit score. You can just open it up.
Great. And then someone asked, between savings and Roth IRA, which one should a student prioritize?
I know this is not the answer that anybody wants to hear, but both. So ideally in your savings, you're gonna have, 3 to 6 months worth of basic expenses. So this isn't like I'm also including my expenses in there for like my travel and clothes and all, it's like your rent, your utilities, your car. So you should like 3 to 6 months. I also think that in uncertain times, having a little bit more than that even is a great idea if you can manage it. But I think like statistics say that most of us don't have $1,000 that we can access, so again, like, let's say that you have a minimal amount that you can save, right? Let's say you have $50 a month that you can save. I'm splitting that between my savings account and my Roth. And it's just to get in that habit. The cool thing about a Roth, and this is important to mention, is that you can actually take out the money that you contributed without penalty. So like, let's say that you contributed $5,000 over the next 3 years or something, and you really needed that money for something. You can take out that contribution, that $5,000. Now you can't take out the growth, okay, because it would have grown, but you could take out the contribution with no tax and no penalty. So like if you really needed it, right, it's there without you having to pay for something. So that's why I'm saying, like, it doesn't actually hurt you to split it, because if in a worst case scenario, you could go ahead and grab that money back out again.
Is there any fee or penalty if you take it out too soon?
Nope, not if you take out the contribution. The growth, yes, do not touch the growth, but the contribution you could take out in an emergency. I don't recommend it though, because that's like you paying your future self. That's for your future, but yeah, there's no penalty.
So another student asked, where do you recommend opening up a Roth IRA if you are a grad student and you haven't had income in a couple of years?
So I like Fidelity or Vanguard, again, because they're like no interface of any large, they still haven't quite figured it out. So like you're gonna get on there, as like a cool Gen Z who understands technology, and you're gonna be like, why is it so clunky and stupid? But they're really the best place, I think, to open it. It's just easier. And there's no fees, right? And one of the things that eats away at your money is fees. So those are important. But the other thing to mention is that you cannot contribute to a Roth unless you have earned income. So you need to have earned income and file your little tax return in order to contribute to the Roth. And do file your tax returns. Like, don't get on the bad side of Uncle Sam. Don't get, or the IRS rather, like just don't file your tax return. There are ways to do it for free or cheap. I think the irs.gov should still have theirs up and running, although they're talking about getting rid of that for some cockamamie reason, which I will never understand. But there should be a way to file for free. Okay, so just had to mention that too.
And then for international students, how can they go about saving and opening Roth IRAs or 401ks?
So international students are tricky, because if you're earning income here, you're paying tax here. But if you're not a citizen and you're here on a student visa, and I would have to look at this, but I don't think that you can do that. You can open a high yield savings account. I'm not sure if you can open a qualified retirement account though. I would have to get back to that person. Whoever that person is, if you want to email me directly, and Deborah will share my email with everybody, but just email me directly because I'll look into it.
Great. And then someone asked for 401ks, 403bs, TSP accounts, like can they only be opened by your employers?
Yes. Yeah, well, yes, with the exception of if you have your own business. So if you start your own company and you are self-employed, then you can you have actually a variety of options. You can open a solo 401k, which behaves like a 401k. Again, you're doing all the contributing. You can open a SEP IRA, there's a simple IRA. There's something else. That's pretty much it. Anyway, there's options if you're self-employed, but if you're not self-employed, like, I mean, let's say that you did a contract job for someone though, like, I don't know if there's anybody here who's like in the film school, but if you go on set, for instance, and or you do some editing work for someone and they pay you via a 1099, you can actually open up your own little solo 401k and start contributing to it that way.
Great. And then what happens to the account if you leave the company?
So you can either roll it, you can leave it there, which I don't recommend because people like lose their account. They're like, I didn't remember even contributing to that, right? Like you don't want like lost money left behind. So you can do one of two things. You can either roll it into your new company's 401k or 403b, or if you're a federal government employee, you can roll it into the TSP. Again, that behaves the same-ish as a 401k and a 403b. They have the same limits. So you can either roll it into your new employer's plan, or you can roll it out into your own IRA. So a traditional IRA will take pre-tax 401k funds, and then you can self-direct.
Great. And then someone asked if all the essential accounts applicable for both US citizens and international students, and are there limitations for the international students?
Yeah, I think it probably depends on your visa. And I wish I was more of an expert on this, and I think it's really important, but I don't have like a great clear answer for that. Because I know that there's restrictions about what you can and can't do, and the rules are different. So I'm sorry.
All good. And then another question was, what is a backdoor Roth IRA?
Okay, so there are income limits to contribute directly to Roth IRAs. So if you make more than I think $135,000 as an individual and $220,000 as a married couple filing joint, then you can't contribute directly to a Roth IRA. So there's a workaround, right? So you basically, what you do is you have two accounts. You have a traditional IRA account and a Roth IRA account at the same institution. Doesn't really matter if they're the same. It just makes it really difficult if they're not. But you put your contribution to the IRA into the traditional IRA, and then you wait. The amount of time that you wait is debated, but it's like most people say 60 to 90 days, and then you convert that contribution into a Roth. So there's plenty of places that will explain how to do this. What's really, really important is that if you're doing that, you need to have zero balances in traditional IRAs, SEP IRAs, and rollover IRAs, and also simple IRAs, but no one has those anymore. So really, I mean, it's very rare. So no balances. So you basically keep that account at a zero balance until you contribute to it. So like when I said you roll your old employer plan into an IRA, now you've sort of like cut yourself off from doing the backdoor Roth. I hope there's a lot of people in here who are going to make that much money where they're going to have to worry about that. That's my hope for this chat. And if that's you, like, and you want me to explain that further, I can, and I have a sheet that explains it. So if you want that sheet, then just email me.
Perfect. And a couple people want the action next step sheets in that sheet as well. So that would be
Yes.
great.
Yeah. Let me, in fact, I'm going to stop my share. And I will grab those right now. Any other questions?
We have a ton more. They
Oh.
really have a lot of questions.
All right, let's keep it going.
Someone asked, what alternatives do you recommend for compounding money besides investing in stocks?
First, I'm going to put the file in the chat. So hopefully that helps. Say the question one more time, Deborah. I'm so sorry.
No worries. What alternatives do you recommend for compounding money besides investing in stocks?
Okay, so most of us, the way that our money compounds is through stock market investments. And most of us invest in the stock market through our workplace plans, right? That's sort of how compound interest works. You can always put your money in a savings account. It compounds the same way. If you want it to be safe, if you put it in a bond mutual fund, it also will compound over time. It's just that bonds have a lower rate of return than stocks because they have less risk. So Other places to get compound interest. I mean, I guess everything could kind of have compound interest. If you collect art, and like it has a steady increase, well, and the percentage increases, is it like, maybe art has a compound interest or, I hate to say precious metals because they are so volatile and they don't really behave normally like a stock market mutual fund. And then I guess real estate, if you have a 4% year-over-year increase, which is our nationally real estate increase is about 4.5% year-over-year, but it is highly localized, as everybody who lives in Southern California knows. Every time you think, well, it can't possibly get any more expensive here, and then it does. So yeah, I mean, pretty much everything that you can invest in is a compound interest vehicle. I hope that helps.
And then the question was, what are your thoughts on CDs? Do you recommend investing these instead of saving accounts for money we don't need immediately?
It just depends. So this may be getting too deep, but the environment that we have been in off and on, but pretty consistently for the past couple of years, is that we have what's called an inverted yield curve, which basically means that you're getting less money for longer term investments in than you are in shorter term. So when you look at CDs, and you can go like Capital One, just click on their CD and you can see like a 1-year CD pays X, a 3-year pays Y, and a 5-year pays Z, right? And you'll notice that the 1-year and the 5-year are very similar, right? So the 5-year maybe even less, which doesn't make any sense, because like if I'm saying, hey, Deborah, I'm going to let you have my money for 5 years, like I need to be compensated for that, right? So like if I'm letting you hold my money for longer, I'm going to have to be compensated for that. But when you're in an inverted yield curve situation, that doesn't, it's like it defies all logic. So that's where we sort of are. That's where we have been. So if that wasn't the case and you didn't need your money for 5 years and the 5-year CD was paying 6% and your money market fund was paying 4%, well, maybe I might consider tying my money up for 5 years. But in this environment, I'm not getting enough of an extra return on a CD versus my high yield savings account to justify tying up that money. Again, that changes, but like I've had a very hard time recommending CDs to my clients over the past few years because I can't get a better return than I can just on a high yield savings account. So
That makes sense. So we have 3 more minutes, so we're going to try to get to as many questions as possible. But again, if we don't get to your question, please feel free to email Laura or the Career Center, and we're happy to help you. Question asked is, I've heard savings to be used for emergency situations like unexpected bills or layoffs. How can I use it for short-term goals or separate the two?
great. So you can do it one of two ways. A lot of people like to have 2 separate accounts, or sometimes more. Like there was a time when people were like 10 savings accounts is the way to go, right? And I think that got like really too confusing, and then I don't hear anybody say that anymore. But essentially, if you have one savings account for emergency reserves where you have a target number there, great. If you have an additional account for short-term, mid-term savings. So this is like, I'm wanting to take a big trip. I'm saving for a car. I'm saving for a down payment for a house. I have family expenses that I know are coming up, like things. I have car repairs that I know that are coming up. Like I don't actually view new tires on your car as an emergency because you knew it was coming, right? But you have to still save for those things. So if you can kind of figure out approximately how much you're going to spend on that over the course of a year, every month you can just put, whatever that amount is divided by 12, you can put it into that account, and that's your short-term and mid-term savings. And this one over here, you just leave alone for emergency reserves. But just be really cognizant of like, is that an emergency? Like, I need a new refrigerator? Like, is that an emergency, or did I know that was coming? Like, the only emergency that I can really is like, I have a job loss, or something happens with my health where I've lost my income. So everything else is pretty much predictable.
That makes sense. This will probably be our last question of the night, but what is the difference between pre-tax and post-tax 401k? And then this kind of goes into it, but a little different, but is it not good to extend over the 50-30-20 rule when it comes to saving?
Okay, so difference in pre-tax and post-tax. So basically you have inside of your 401k, most of us have an option to do either pre-tax or Roth. So when you're looking at those money buckets, like your 401k can be in either one. Like you can do pre-tax or you can do Roth. I don't like rule of thumbs, but or rules of thumb, but I also think that like, if you're in your working years, doing like 70% of your savings in pre-tax and 30% in Roth is probably like a decent goal to have. And you can do that all through your 401k. I just like having a Roth outside of that as well, because it's like, you can invest it in what you want, and it's probably lower cost than your 401k. Then I don't remember the 50-20-30 rule. I think that rule is like out the window. Who can afford to do that? Like I think we're all just like trying to get by the best we can. Like I don't know anybody who's like, yeah, I spend 50% of my take home on like needs, and then 20% in savings and 30% on wants. Is that that math?
No.
I mean, just literally do the best you can to save a tiny bit, because I think if you tried to hit that unrealistic expectation, like you saw but like I don't see that happening, because I don't actually see a whole lot of like fluff in the way that we are living right now as a society. So yeah.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was a great session, power session. We learned so much and had lots of students and alumni in attendance. Again, students and alumni, we are going to take a transcript of who attended, and then we will reach out to 98 of you all and make sure you get this wonderful book that I have right here, Earn, Save, Spend, Laura Davis's book, CFP. And now we'll do what we traditionally do at the end of these webinars. We're going to put up our fingers, and Deborah and Laura, say with me, fight
Bye,
on.
everyone.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you so much.
Bye.